and crumpled. Now you kind of look at them like scoundrels. What won't you do for that damn career? Listen, this is a disgusting business. That's all I'm gonna say. This business is so disgusting that I can't. I think that Jay-Z and Beyonce are master manipulators.
When Jay was going after B was a very young...
each other and you respect each other's music. You know, it's always that conversation, yo, we gotta do something. You know that.
Right.
You know, the time filler.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? When that time filler turns into something real, then it's...
The picture that is becoming more and more clear is that we aren't just looking at a bunch of wealthy creeps operating with total impunity. We are looking at a massive criminal network that may be responsible for the rape and murder of hundreds.
There comes a moment in every powerful industry where people stop asking what is legal and start asking what is untouchable. This story opens at that exact moment, not with a name, not with an accusation, but with a question that quietly echoes through music, media, and money. What wouldn't someone do to protect a billion-dollar legacy? Because behind the awards, the carefully managed images, and the perfectly timed public appearances, there exists a system where silence is currency, and loyalty is enforced, not earned. The narrator frames this not as a sudden scandal, but as the slow peeling back of a curtain that many suspected was hiding something darker. For years, people whispered about power couples who didn't just dominate charts, but dominated rooms. Rooms where decisions were made, careers were built or erased, and consequences somehow never arrived. The audience is invited to sit with that discomfort, to recognize that this isn't about gossip, but about patterns that repeat themselves whenever influence grows too large to challenge. And just as the question settles in, the story shifts. Because this moment didn't come out of nowhere. Something cracked the surface, and once it did, everything underneath began to move. When previously sealed documents began circulating, the reaction wasn't shock so much as recognition. People didn't gasp because they couldn't believe it. They paused because it felt like confirmation of something long suspected. The narrator explains how lists tied to Jeffrey Epstein reopened conversations that had been buried under settlements, non-disclosure agreements, and conveniently timed distractions. These weren't verdicts or convictions, but names, associations, overlaps that told a story without spelling it out. One name in particular pulled disproportionate attention, Jay-Z. Not because proof had suddenly appeared, but because...
Allegedly, the song Daughter on Beyonce's Cowboy Carter album.
I love that one.
It's potentially a murder confession about Jay-Z's mistress, Kathy White.
Think about Claudia Jordan right now. Claudia Jordan don't ever mention my mother name. She mentioned it yesterday. Talking about why people are afraid to come forward. You mean like you? You was Diddy girl. Corey was Jay-Z girl. Why don't you claim your friend? Claudia.
So Jack, when you say...
When I say Corey, I'm talking about Kathy White.
Oh yeah, that's what I was about to ask.
Jay-Z's pregnant mistress,
yeah,
who died of an imaginary fucking aneurysm. Just like the woman who was best friends with Kim and Kimura, who wrote the book Bling and died as soon as it made the bestsellers list. Who the fuck was these people supposed to go to? You can't go to the boss because the boss is fucking you. And the boss's boss don't get no... Can't go to the authorities. They're all bought and paid for. You could try to get a special prosecutor, but they'll just pay somebody to reassign him to another case. Where the fuck you go when you get f***ed over by the industry? Nowhere. That's where you go nowhere, which is where people like me step in. You right, I go to Diddy parties. To walk mother out, cause ain't nobody stopping me when I come. You Sean.
Hey man.
weirdo. I don't get no what you got in your head, that neural link. You'll never outthink me. Ever. All I do is frustrate your AI. You can't quantify me. You can't even control your wife. You gonna handle a bitch like me. You can't even control that goofy bitch. You should have did a better job. Maybe she wouldn't have had to lose her mind on Kathy. Cause you ain't protecting you. You're protecting her. Wonder why?
Because of how often his name surfaced around other powerful figures already exposed. The narrator stresses the distinction between being named and being guilty, while also highlighting how influence has historically shielded people from scrutiny long before any court ever got involved. What unsettled viewers wasn't just who appeared in these documents, but who always seemed to orbit the same circles. And as the internet began connecting dots, another question emerged. If this was the public-facing damage, what had stayed hidden? That question pointed directly toward the stories people had been afraid to repeat out loud. The narrator moves carefully here, explaining that some stories survive not because they are proven, but because they are persistent. Anonymous accounts, hotline calls, and secondhand testimonies began resurfacing, all sharing similar structures: powerful rooms, unconscious silence, and witnesses who claimed they were present but not participating. One allegation in particular painted a disturbing picture of passivity, describing a moment where wrongdoing allegedly occurred while others watched. The power of the claim wasn't in graphic detail, but in what it suggested about normalization. The narrator emphasizes that these are allegations, unverified in court, yet impossible to ignore because of how often similar stories emerge in industries where hierarchy is everything. The concept of handlers and facilitators is introduced, people who allegedly made access possible while keeping their own hands clean. What made this section unsettling wasn't surprise, but familiarity. Audiences had heard versions of this story before, involving different names, same structure. And as listeners process this, attention naturally shifts toward the person closest to the center of power, the one whose silence began to feel louder than any denial.
Now, I did a Rockaware photo shoot in Colorado, and I think it was during the winter time of 06 or 07. And Naomi Campbell was there, actress Jamie King was there, Jay was there, B was there, and he rented this house. And we were supposed to do this rap party for this photo shoot. We rented this house, and we were watching LeBron play. And after the game, it had to been like 10 or 11 o'clock. So we getting ready to party. Mind you, it's all adults, which I can respect that. So when 11 o'clock hit, we turned on the music, we started drinking, and then out of nowhere came these young I don't know where they came from. For a rap party at 11 o'clock at night, drinking, loud music, and us dancing wild. Like, I don't know where these kids came from. And then I happened to sit down because I was dancing with one of the assistants. And I sat next to this child, and the child sat next to Beyonce. So I hear B say something about, doesn't this look sexy? Or isn't this sexy? And in my mind, and mind you, I'm not awakened as I'm awakened now. So in my mind, I'm like, what did she just say? And then I didn't pay no attention to it. And then, you know, obviously the liquor took hold of me and I had to leave. So I said bye to everybody and left. But those kids remained. I don't know if those kids were from the photo shoot themselves, but the fact that these kids came around adults during drinking hours or partying hours was already alarming to me. So when I hear something like this happens, I can't really discount it and say, oh, he could never do this. Because I'm hearing stories, I'm seeing it with my own eyes, and I've been in situations where something don't sound or look right, and it's usually involving
death. And don't
Dream Hampton spearheaded the Surviving R. Kelly campaign, which fueled the Me Too campaign. And that was all funded by Sean Carter to make sure that Robert Kelly went to jail. Get his lick back. Why is nobody understanding that Dream Hampton was being financed and ran by Sean Carter? They were able to go and get all of these witnesses because he was there with Robert Kelly. How does Jay-Z sit down with Gayle King and she not ask him one question about the intersection between him and Aaliyah and Robert Kelly? This is insane that people keep refusing to see what's right there.
How many victims potentially do you think there could be?
Thousands. Thousands. I've talked to hundreds that I deal with still myself. I have 3 victims right now who are willing to give testimony about not only what Mr. Carter has done to them, but his wife as well. They're a nasty little couple. They do nasty things.
What do you think happened with Kim
Keeping people against their will. Putting people on planes while they're unconscious, just like Aaliyah got on that plane. Unconscious. There's a lot of things that people don't want to talk about.
And while we're on the topic of Aaliyah,
At this point, the narrator addresses the question that many tried to avoid. Where does Beyoncé fit into all of this? Not as an accusation, but as an unavoidable line of inquiry. For years, she had been presented as separate, protected, almost untouchable. But public perception began to shift as people revisited old interviews, carefully curated appearances, and moments where nothing was said when something perhaps should have been. The narrator explains how audiences often struggle with the idea that proximity to power comes without knowledge. Silence, in this context, becomes ambiguous. Is it survival, strategy, or complicity? No definitive answers are offered, only the observation that long-term partnerships at that level rarely operate blindly. As online discussions intensified, people began digging backward, not forward, searching for moments where cracks may have briefly appeared before being smoothed over. And one moment in particular refused to stay buried, no matter how much time passed. The narrator revisits 2011, a year many thought was settled history. During a televised appearance, a moment occurred that the internet never forgot. A visible change, a movement that didn't behave the way people expected, and suddenly the illusion wavered. At the time, explanations were offered, images released, narratives corrected, but doubt lingered. The narrator explains how Wendy Williams became one of the only mainstream voices willing to question it publicly, despite the risks. What made this significant wasn't the rumor itself, but how aggressively it was shut down. Questions about surrogacy, image control.
Honestly, I was at a party at Diddy crib in LA. This was the beginning of 2020. You know what I mean? Diddy had put everybody else out the crib, like the influx of people he had put them out. But he had took a liking to me in particular around the time, man. It was really, you know what I mean, like putting his arm around me.
Right.
So he had put majority of the people out, but he allowed me to stay in there.
Mm-hmm.
Me and maybe about 15 others.
Right.
Jay-Z and Beyonce being, 2 of the other 15 people in the room. So that'll just put into perspective of the type of company I was in at the moment, And she came over and introduced herself to me like as if she had to.
Right.
Beyonce, cut it out. But I'm a big fan of your work, you know what I'm saying? Whoop, whoop, and that was just dope. That was dope as hell to me, man.
their own. Now, what made
Also was just recently contacted by someone who wanted me to essentially represent them in the sale of one of the Diddy tapes. So, which I declined that because...
Wait a minute, say that again. Say that again, back up. You're saying that there's tapes and they're being shopped?
Yes, there have been people already shopping.
We've heard about the tapes, but
yes.
The shopping thing is
Yes, there already have been tapes leaking around Hollywood, being shopped around to individuals in Hollywood. But one particular person contacted me to shop a particular video they were in possession of and to contact the person who was in the video to see if they were interested in purchasing the video before it became a public knowledge.
I've heard this before, so like a catch and
correct.
Wow, can you, and I guess you can't reveal the person who is on
No,
this
I can't
tape.
explain who the person was, but
High profile?
Mr. Combs was in the tape, and this other person is, I would venture to say, more high profile than Mr. Combs.
Really? Really? And you've seen it?
I've seen stills of the video.
Okay.
So
you can verify
that it exists, that it's real, that the other person in the video is very visible. It's no question if it's that person in the video, and I can tell the video is pornographic in nature.
Oh my, all right. So we know that he videotaped a lot of activities at his home, did he? And it sounds like there was probably a lot of hidden cameras as well. Is that what is being talked about?
Yes, this was actually in his Atlanta home, at a home he had in Atlanta at one point. And it does seem that the person isn't like looking into the video, so it's, to me, doesn't seem like that person knows they're being videotaped.
What he is a broke down Mandingo fighter still working on behalf of the NFL. He did that interview with the baby person who sat there and told him about when he met Beyonce. Y'all remember that? That happened on Shay Shay. And he talked about how he was at the Diddy party at Diddy's house. And how after, the festivities were winding down and it was getting later into the middle of the night, approaching 3 a.m., Diddy got rid of almost everybody, but he let the baby stay behind with him and his close friends. And then he talked about how Beyonce was there and Jay-Z was there. Not at their house, at Diddy's house.
But check this out, y'all.
The story introduces Kathy White, not as a headline, but as a ghost lingering in the background. Her passing, officially attributed to natural causes, had always carried unanswered questions among those who followed industry whispers. The narrator explains how her name reappeared years later through lyrics, interviews, and offhand comments that fans began dissecting with renewed interest. Music, after all, has often served as coded confession or emotional release. Listeners debated whether certain songs reference guilt, loss, or something darker, while the narrator carefully avoids stating conclusions. What matters here is not what can be proven, but why the story refuses to disappear. Every time public scrutiny intensified, this name returned, suggesting unfinished business. And as more accounts surfaced from people once close to the inner circle, a broader picture began to take shape, one that extended far beyond a single incident. At this stage, the narrator pulls back to reveal the larger structure. Former friends, collaborators, and insiders began speaking about environments that felt wrong in hindsight. Stories of exclusive gatherings, blurred boundaries, and power dynamics that discouraged questioning emerged. One former associate described seeing things that didn't sit right, moments dismissed at the time.
This has been going on since 2006, and it's just been getting worse and worse and worse. And for a very long time, I put this person on a pedestal. I loved them. I'd send emails, publicly, happy birthday and all this stuff. And the entire time, this person was casting spells and manipulating me and controlling my job situations, my relationships, just all kinds of things.
And trust, Wendy has receipts on all of this.
Part of the reason why they're already living separate lives, and we may actually see one of the biggest divorces in Hollywood, is because Jay-Z is up next to be exposed. And it's only so much of these stories that Jay-Z can, he can pay off or he can block. He won't be able to stop this. And she knows it, and he knows it too. As far as who's gonna be the breakout victim / story, I don't know. But I'm just letting you know that once that comes out and Jay-Z is exposed for his nefarious past, you're gonna see Beyonce divorce him. Okay, and she may or may not do an interview, but you're gonna their publicist is gonna release something. She's gonna say, "Oh, the Carters have been separated for some time. They built this beautiful life, blah 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 blah." Now, before all this happens, we may get another tour. We may get another album out of both of them. I don't know, because at the end of the day, they about their money first. They're gonna do what's best for business first. As far as Beyonce is concerned, do she love him? I mean, he's really all that she knows.
In the final section, the narrator addresses blind items and whispered strategies circulating behind closed doors. Claims suggest someone deeply embedded in this system may be planning an escape, not out of innocence, but survival. Allegations of emotional control, exhaustion, and fear of becoming collateral damage dominate these discussions. The narrator explains how history shows that when exposure becomes inevitable, distancing becomes strategic. Rumors of separation, overseas movement, and sudden career pauses are framed not as coincidence, but as positioning. The story closes without answers, deliberately so.